Hello and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo. I'm your host Matt Addison with Paul Gorst, Ian Doyle and Theo Squires alongside me as we talk Porto, Southampton, Ralf Rangnick, injuries and much more. We'll start though with a look back at the midweek game in the Champions League against Porto. Gorsty. Liverpool didn't need to win it, they did win it, but perhaps the biggest thing from that game was that it doesn't appear that Liverpool have got any more injury concerns.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think Klopp had too many options, did he, in terms of resting and rotating, because he had about 7 players injured before the game. Obviously, Robertson and Henderson played about half an hour each, and they were not exactly 100%, so we couldn't change it too much. So I think he struck the balance right in terms of playing Nico Williams, obviously continuing with Kostas Tsimikas at left-back. Konate got a game, didn't he? And obviously, big night for Tyler Morton, biggest night of his fledgling career so far. So, all in all, a decent night's work for Liverpool, wasn't it? Comfortable win in the end. One of the goals of the season from Thiago, who again looked really good in midfield. So, loads of ticks in the boxes and not too many X's. So, it was a fairly routine afternoon, really, or evening, and now they move on to Milan and. Again, hopefully by then the injury options will have eased off again. So, all in all, a good night at the office for Klopp and on the team.
Yeah, very straightforward victory in the end. I wasn't massively impressed by Porto, to be honest, Doyle, considering they probably could have done with a few points to get through. But I suppose we should touch on the Thiago goal. Obviously, Gorsty mentions it there. Plenty of debate about whether it touched the ground or not. What's your verdict on that? And what was your verdict on the goal itself?
Well, there is no verdict. It didn't touch the ground. Simple as that. You watch all the replays, it doesn't touch the ground. Anybody who thinks that it touches the ground needs to get some new glasses. And if they don't wear any glasses, get themselves down to the opticians immediately, because it did not touch the ground. Porto were really poor, weren't they? I thought second half was a bit weird. When they went behind, they just decided, let's just fall over all the time and dive. And it was like, well, hang on, you're getting BT. And this is against the Liverpool team who in the first half, so the first half an hour, were there for the taking. I mean, they were a little bit all over the shop defensively. Liverpool, that is. Porto had that great chance, didn't they, which they wasted. And I think if that had gone, it would have been a completely different game. But it didn't go in. So I don't really like doing ifs and buts and, what if this. So I do think that Liverpool did in the end won reasonably comfortably, and as Gorsty said, there were a lot of ticks, and one of them was Thiago. It was a great strike, but it backed up what he did against Arsenal at the weekend, because I thought he had a very good game then as well. This was a game where he could, he was given the time to pass the ball about. He had that, he was a greater experience in that midfield three. Tyler Morton spoke after the game about how Thiago and Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain helped him through the game. So all in all, lots to be encouraged about. Thiago himself will be interesting to see. I know we'll get into our team selector in a bit. Interesting to see whether he plays against Southampton on Saturday. But that said, Klopp in his press conference did say that, well, there's a reason we took him off. When we took him off was to make sure he didn't get overly tired. That was only his 4th start of the season. He missed most of the summer, didn't he? He was away for the Euros and then came back with an injury. And then he got injured again after a couple of games into the season with a calf problem. So I wouldn't say he's got a lot of catching up to do, but in terms of his rhythm, I think that's what he needs. And, he'll play some points on Saturday. And if he plays like he's done in the last couple of games, Liverpool will be all the better for it.
Yeah, it's maybe a bit strong, Theo, to say it's a turning point or anything like that for him, because we know the quality that Thiago has got, but it does kind of feel like if he can stay fit over the next few weeks, there's going to be loads and loads of games. Doyle there mentions the fact that he needs rhythm to get up to speed and be at his best. It kind of feels like a good time for him to really kick on in his Liverpool career.
Yeah, but that's the same for most of Liverpool's midfield options, that you have these injury doubts over. Like, we've done these podcasts and we've said the same about Naby Keita, we've said the same about Oxlade-Chamberlain. You give them a run of games and they find that rhythm and they can prove their quality again. And then more times than not, they've been getting injuries and those doubts re-emerge. It is just a case of them staying fit. Liverpool have been starved of these midfield options so far this season, and apart from Elliott and perhaps Jones, they seem to be coming back at the right time, the more senior ones especially. And when we know how busy this festive period is going to be, good timing for it as well. But then you've had these doubts over Keita and Oxlade-Chamberlain. and they've stood up this season when they've played and when they've been fit, they've done their job. And Thiago as well, we know that he's one of his finest midfielders of his generation. He just needs to be able to do it more consistently without the injuries. He's had these setbacks throughout his career at Bayern Munich as well, when he wasn't necessarily being able to play 30, 40 games a season every year. But Liverpool have got a number of options, so he doesn't need to start every game. It's just about managing him and getting him in the right sort of fixtures. The last couple have suited him perfectly. He's been able to get on the ball, dictate the play, and show why Jurgen Klopp is such a big fan and wanted to sign him in the first place. He can be a game-changing midfielder. Like, there's not many in the Liverpool squad who would have been able to watch that ball as well as he did and put it exactly where he put it in the bottom corner. Like, you knew what he wanted to do as soon as that ball was coming back to him. The surprise was it actually happening. And then you think, hang on, this is Thiago. Of course he can do that. We've seen what he can do with the ball every week when he does play, when the training videos get released. He is such a gifted player. There isn't really a turning point there or doubts for him to really show his quality. You just want him to be able to stay fit, and so they can call upon him every week when they need to. But yeah, there's a few players like this in the Liverpool midfield especially who so far just haven't been able to be available week in, week out.
Yeah, it certainly feels like an important period for Thiago the next few weeks. Alongside him, Gorst, you mentioned Tyler Morton before. I was really, really impressed with the maturity of his performance to come into a Champions League game, albeit Porto weren't brilliant. But even so, on that kind of stage to perform like that, I think it just proves really and underlines the fact he's got a big future ahead of him.
Yeah, there was two things he did really well. There was one where he cut out it was an interception, wasn't it, to stop the cutback, which would have been almost a certain goal for Porto in the first half. And then in the second half, it was the pass for Salah, who basically got Liverpool up the pitch. He played the 1-2 with Henderson, and Liverpool were 2-0 up and game, set and match. So, in between those two big moments, I thought he was very neat and tidy, and like getting stuck in, wasn't overawed by the magnitude of the game. This is a kid who's only played, junior football up until this season, hasn't he? Thought he'd come on really well against Norwich in the Carabao Cup, and then kind of held down the middle of the pitch against Preston really well when Curtis Jones and Oxlade-Chamberlain went foraging around the rest of the pitch. But against Porto in the Champions League, it was obviously a massive step up, and he didn't look phased, did he? So, it looks like Liverpool might have another one in the hands. He's only 19, so they're not going to be putting too much pressure on him or anything like that. But just if he can have a season of this type of night, just little cameos here and there, and just kind of showing what he can do when it's asked of him. And as long as Liverpool stay in that Carabao Cup, he's going to get more and more minutes on the pitch. So they'll be able to reflect on a really good week for him, and we'll just go from strength to strength, and we'll see how he gets on. But certainly, from what we've seen so far, someone who isn't going to be daunted by the task of playing in a Liverpool midfield.
Yeah, certainly promising signs for him. We've seen a fair bit of him at the academy for the youth teams. He often plays a bit of a different role, actually, slightly further up the pitch as a number 8 rather than a number 6. Do you think there's a best position for him moving forward, or is it just a case of he take the minutes and take the chances whenever he can, and it doesn't particularly matter which role he has? The very fact that he's on the pitch for Liverpool at senior level is just a huge thing in itself.
Well, if you're a youngster, as you just said, you just want to be on the pitch. You're not really that fussed where you're playing. It's a little bit later down the line where you go, well, I'd rather be playing in X position or Y position, because you feel as though you can have a greater chance of actually making an impact and justifying what you believe your talents are. But with Tyler, you're right. He having seen him play quite a bit at the thing is, it was only a year ago. I think it was about just over a year ago that he made his debut for the under-23s, which isn't that long ago. And he is still young for the under-23s, because he was only 19 recently, wasn't he? So that's still young for a footballer. But at that level, but at the same token, Trent was in the team, Curtis Jones was in the team. At that age, you go back to Gerrard and Carragher and players like that. They were all getting into the first team around this age. So in that sense, it's not a surprise. The difficulty for any youngster coming to this Liverpool team at the moment is the fact that they are one of the best teams in the world. So if you're coming in, you've got to be really good. And I think, as you know, for quite some time, Liverpool have, without ever really mentioning him too much, you can kind of get it when you go down the academy for, you spend a bit of time down there, you kind of get an idea of some of the players that they're quite fancy. And Tyler Morton's definitely been one of them. They think that, maybe his best position is a bit further forward. I must admit, I'm surprised seeing him playing quite so well as he is doing in that defensive midfield role. Although technically it's not quite the same as like a Fabinho role. He's not quite that pure a defensive midfield. I think that when he's been playing, the midfield's been shuffled around a little bit to kind of help him out in that sense. But overall, he's somebody who I think personally he's more of a Jordan Henderson type of midfielder in the sense that he can do like a bit of everything. He can do. Whereas you look at someone like Steven Gerrard and you go, quite clearly he's a lot better going forward than he is defensively, even though he did play, right back for half a Champions League final. But you knew that his best position where he needed to be was further up the field. I think with Tyler, he could play anywhere in that engine room. I do think, though, if he gets an opportunity, certainly later in the season, or possibly in the next few weeks, as Ghosty said, if they get through in that Carabao Cup, you think he'd be playing against Leicester. If you get through, there's a two-legged semi-final in January where Salah, Mane and Keita aren't going to be around. So that'll be very interesting to see where he ends up playing there, how seriously Liverpool take it. It's a bit further down the line, but if they can get him playing a little bit further upfield, he'll be able to maybe see what he's all about. But for him at the moment, that position is perhaps easier because you perhaps don't have to get the same relationships with the players quite as far in front. But as we know with Liverpool, it's all about building those relationships. From that position, he can rely a little bit more on his midfielders, just give the ball to Thiago, Oxlade-Chamberlain, whoever's playing with him, and then they can do the rest. But as Ghosty said, he's got that range of passing, and he put that great, long field pass over the top for Salah to chase, and ultimately that led to the second. And he did exactly the same in the UEFA Youth League in the game against Porto. At Porto, where Liverpool were getting beat 1-0, towards the end, he puts a deep ball from inside his area over the top. Fraundorf runs onto it, puts it in, and they get a draw. And I have to mention that we were all down at the academy on Wednesday before the Champions League game. We saw the youth team thrash Porto 4-0. Very good performance, and they've given themselves a great chance of getting through to the knockout stage of that competition as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Plenty of promising signs for Liverpool across all age groups. Well, Theo, we've spoken about two of the three midfielders. We'll finish with the third one, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. I think it's been a decent couple of weeks for him. He seems to be getting into a bit of rhythm and a bit of form himself. But I suppose, again, that the caveat to that is similar to Thiago. It's just a case now of continuing that for him.
Yeah, he's had a good start to the season. I think he's the only one of Liverpool's midfielders to not have actually picked up an injury yet. Touch wood, that stays the same. The only game he missed was when his partner gave birth, so had to be there for that. But yeah, he's had a few games now, starting games in a row, and we're starting to see the old Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain again. Not everything he's trying is coming off, but there's that hard work there. He's pressing defenders. He's winning the ball back. He's got that urgency about him to bring the ball forward from midfield, try and create something, whether it's a shot on goal or link up with the other players ahead of him. And he's managed to fill that gap on the right-hand side, linking up with Salah and linking up with Trent. It suits him, doesn't it? Because he's played out wide himself, both as a wing-back and as in a front three. And he is a player, if he can stay fit, will be important for Liverpool this season. We know they're going to lose Salah and Mane for the Cup of Nations. So, he could be an option there in that front three, either out wide or as this false nine that they actually did play him for briefly when the substitutions were made in midweek, and they've spoken about before that he is there as an option. And he is a talented player. We've seen it before. He just needs to get this run of games. And he's unfortunate that with the injuries he picks up, it's not the same as Naby Keita, where it is just a setback. These small little niggles that keep him out for a few weeks every so often. When he seems to get an injury, it's one that will keep him out for a few months. And he's had 2 or 3 in his Liverpool career. And when they come about, he's then on the sidelines and it's harder to get back in. Like last year, it was a time where Liverpool couldn't really rotate because they had all the injury crisis in defence. So it was just stick with what you trusted to get you over the line. And he was just this bit part role off the bench. But we've seen before, when you give him games, he can make a difference. Like that's when he enjoyed his best form of his Liverpool career in that first season. We'll remember that stunning goal against Manchester City in the Champions League. There's been plenty of transfer rumours about his future so far this year. His contract's up in 2 years' time. He's almost at that extent where he's playing for his Liverpool future here. But he could easily be one of those players that might want to look on to move on in the summer. Can he raise funds where he has an eye on being in the England squad for the World Cup when he thinks he's deserving of more regular game time? But he loves it at Liverpool. He's a very popular player in that squad. And he's a valuable player in that squad too because of his versatility, because he can play so many roles. And he is silencing the doubters here because it wasn't a case of injury has finished him off. when he's had these games, he's showing that he can still do a job. It's just whether he gets those opportunities when everyone is fit. Like if you've got Keita fit, Thiago fit, Fabinho fit, Henderson fit, Elliott, Curtis Jones, where does Oxlade-Chamberlain fit in Jurgen Klopp's pecking order? You'd imagine he'd probably be getting limited game time there. But at the moment, he's doing what you want from him. He's doing what managers are asking for him, and that's all you can really expect from him. He's certainly stated his claim over the last couple of weeks, and he's doing a good job.
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting to see whether or not he plays at the weekend, but we'll come on to that shortly. Just before we do move on from Porto, Doyle, I'll come to you on this one, on Ibrahima Konate's performance. I think you gave him a 5 in your player ratings, correct me if I'm wrong. It maybe wasn't the best performance from him, but I suppose it's one of those that it is quite hard to come into a game when it doesn't matter, and Porto are a bit strange, and it certainly isn't something that we should judge him on long term.
No, I mean the rest of them managed it. Just he didn't. So that was one of those. So I mean, I got quite a bit of abuse from a certain section of the fan base for giving him a 5 and suggesting that his performance is perhaps why we haven't seen quite so much from him this season, which I think is fair enough. It's not my fault that my stuff gets taken out of context by other websites. You know, we know what this is like. Pretty sure they won't be putting that on their website. Anyway, Konate. I mean, I'm personally speaking, I'm not worried about it. And I know, as I said before, getting to the team selector, I reckon he's playing against Southampton. I reckon he'll play against Southampton because did well against Man United. Can't really judge him on, I think it was Norwich away, wasn't it, his first game? But Brighton was an interesting one because that was one where Liverpool themselves didn't play well. And I think he kind of was affected more by the first half where Liverpool were trying to find their feet. I think he was still trying to find his. Whereas other players were confident in their own game. He's still trying to work out his with Liverpool. So he had that double impact of what was going on. And he was, said that early goal, he was a bit lucky. It was this mistake that it came, early chance, I should say. What should have been a goal. It came from his mistake. And there was one or two other things where he looked a little bit slow, a little bit off the pace. That's not to say he's slow, he hasn't got any pace. It's just that he seemed a bit hesitant, a bit nervous, a little bit unsure. A bit better second half. And I think possibly Matip helped him in that respect. And certainly the fact that the midfield got a bit more to grips with the game and the fact Liverpool winning 1-0. And as you said before, Porto weren't very good. That also played into the hands. I mean, Porto, for a team that I think I'm right in saying that when they got beat by Liverpool, since then they've won every league game in Portugal. And they didn't lose any of their group games, either the two of them. Did he play? Milan wasn't home and away. I think they got a win and a draw. So I think they came into the game with a lot of confidence. And you could see that in the first 20, 30 minutes. They kind of went for it. And that may have been a slight issue for Konate because he's not kind of been used to coming up against that with Liverpool because, Brighton, for all intents and purposes, in that first half didn't go for it. United certainly didn't. They didn't have anything. And Norwich didn't. So it was something different for him. As I said, I think, there's nothing to worry about long term at all. Not to worry about at all. He's only 22. He's got loads more. They'll need him over these next few months because if Joe Gomez, we don't know when he's going to be back. Nat Phillips isn't getting much of a look in, so it does look as though the 3 defenders at the moment are going to be on rotation: are Konate, Matip, and Van Dijk. So, Matip isn't going to play 3 games in a week, I don't think. Van Dijk, they're trying to make sure that he doesn't either, or certainly limit them. So he's going to be playing his games, and he's only going to get better.
Yeah, certainly be interesting to see if he does start on Saturday. Just before we do move on to Southampton, though, we'll have a quick word on Manchester United because, of course, Ralf Rangnick, it looks like, is going to be heading there, Gorsty. We spoke a fair bit on Monday's podcast about them getting a succession of decisions very wrong, but Jurgen Klopp, full of praise for Rangnick, as you might expect. Does this kind of feel to you like one that they have finally made a sensible decision, a sensible managerial appointment?
Does a bit, doesn't it? Which is quite unnerving because it's the last thing you expect from the Manchester United hierarchy to be making smart, intelligent football decisions because it's something that they haven't really done too much of over the last 3 years, aside from just buying players who were probably obvious names that any football fan in world football would have been able to pluck out of a hat. So yeah, I mean, I'm not too au fait with Rangnick's work, but I know he's someone who, not necessarily a manager per se, he's more of a figurehead in terms of director of football, sporting director type personality who has got contacts throughout Europe and throughout the world and can utilise them to help teams. I mean, what he's done with the likes of the Red Bull Football Group, he's turned them into, quite significant names, hasn't he, in European football? You think of Salzburg and the players that they've been able to produce in recent years, and obviously Leipzig have only been around since about 2009, is it? Something like that, and they were Champions League finalists in 2020, and I'm got a clue about what he's done with Lokomotiv Moscow, but certainly someone who's highly regarded in the game, and Klopp was speaking highly of him today at the AXA Training Centre. He was saying that he's someone who is very committed to the pressing style, and he was one of the early kind of people who were pushing this idea of pressing as a group, and it's very much a tactic that he likes to work with. And if you look at United, that's something that they certainly need to improve on. It's not going to happen overnight because it just doesn't work like that, does it? But certainly, teams are playing through United at will, certainly through the midfield, and you've got the likes of Ronaldo not really closing down and pressing from the front, and that has been one of the issues that they've had to wrestle with all season. So let's see how he gets on. It will take him a while to get up and running, but certainly a step in the right direction as far as United are concerned. And I was a bit surprised by it, to be honest, because I just expected them to do something silly and just bring in a name for a name's sake, as they tend to do more often than not these days.
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting to see how Cristiano Ronaldo gets on in a high-intensity, high-pressing environment, Theo. But as Gorsty said, it will take a bit of time for Rangnick to get his players up to speed with what he wants to do. How much of a difference do you think this will make this season for Manchester United? Do they suddenly become a threat at the top, or is it just a case of pretty much they'll carry on as they are for the time being and just sort of see where things stand?
No, not really worried about this little club in Manchester, to be honest. It's an interim manager, isn't it? It's only a few months he's going to be in charge. It's steadying the ship, and then you'd imagine they're going to go for a bigger appointment. I think they were saying that he might be a consultant for them for 2 years after that. That was part of the deal that he's supposedly signing. Yes, he'll steady the ship. I suppose it's similar to Guus Hiddink when he had his couple of spells as interim at Chelsea. We think that's a respectable name. He's got a good CV. And he does better than his predecessor, but it's not really taking him on to that next level. It's just making sure they don't miss out on Champions League football before passing on the baton. You'd imagine the players are going to respond to his methods a bit better than they did with Solskjaer, and it should be enough for him to get into Champions League. But if you're looking at managerial appointments this year and the names of managers, I'd be more concerned by Conte than I would by this one. It's just, even looking at his CV, hasn't got that pedigree of winning trophies at elite clubs. Yet he's done brilliant work wherever he's been. Leipzig, with Hanover, I think when Klopp was saying he was challenging against him for a promotion when they're at Mainz, Schalke getting him to the Champions League, clubs like this. But if you're that successful a manager in Germany, normally you either get the Bayern Munich job or you get the Germany job. And he's not had either. So is he perhaps not this complete elite manager that you think will be competing with a Tuchel, with a Guardiola, with a Klopp? But Manchester United aren't competing with these three at the moment. They're not going to be competing with them this season. They're too far behind already. For them, it is just a case of getting into the top four, maybe having a decent run in the Champions League. Now they've got through to the knockout stages, having a go of the FA Cup. But yeah, it's going to take them a while to get things right. Like we thought Van Gaal might have been a good appointment, or Mourinho might have been a good appointment. That didn't work out brilliantly for them. It's just they need a long time to settle down and to take these new steps. And Cristiano Ronaldo up front, that was Solskjaer's undoing. He had this plan in place with Cavani, with Sancho, Greenwood and all this, and then you put Ronaldo in it and it just went across that whole thinking. So to get a manager that's going to get him to fit into this or be bold enough to go, actually, I don't want to start you, you're just going to be on the bench. It's a big ask for anyone. He is just the substitute teacher for a few months until they can go for Pochettino, wherever it is in the summer. But then if he does well enough to actually get the job on a permanent basis, well, then they're in a mess again because they've been backed into a corner when that wasn't really the decision they wanted to do.
Theo's just absolutely destroyed Ralf Rangnick today.
Yeah, absolutely no chance that one's a success, according to Theo. But another link with the Red Bull group is Ralf Hasenhüttl. I believe he was at Leipzig a few years ago, Doyle. We'll go on to discuss Southampton next, of course, Liverpool's next opponents. They've already taken a point away from home at Manchester City earlier this season. I think they took Chelsea to penalties in one of the cup competitions as well. So it's not going to be easy, but Liverpool really should be winning this one.
Well, Southampton drew at home to United, and they played Chelsea in the league, and it was 1-1 until they had a player sent off. That was at Stamford Bridge as well. So Chelsea got a bit lucky there and got a bit lucky in the League Cup, which has kind of been a running theme for them this season, to be honest. But that's another point entirely. But Southampton, yeah, actually, they're a weird team, aren't they? I think they're better than the results suggest. And whenever they play Liverpool, they always seem to like take it up a notch. I think Hassan Hootel, I think he loves going up against Klopp. I mean, we saw what happened last time when they played each other at Southampton last year, where he was in tears after the game because they'd won 1-0. To be fair, I was in tears after the game because I was so cold. That was what a bad memory that was. Anyway, they waited for me to finish, then they turned the lights out. They said, "Are you the last one there?" I was like, "Yeah." Anyway, back to the game in hand. I think with Southampton, they are kind of like, the best way of describing them is like they are like a mini Liverpool, a lesser Liverpool. They want to play the game the same way as Liverpool, but they know quite well they haven't got the same caliber of players, so they know they can't quite do it. So they kind of come up with some kind of hybrid version of it, And I know we were talking just before the podcast about the like top four one stage last season, and they got beat 9-0, and they looked like they were going down, and then they put some results together, and then they're all right again. And I think that's just the kind of team Southampton are, and I think they have been that forever, haven't they? That's just their level. And what Southampton fans, knowing them, what they like, they know they're probably not going to win anything. If they get to a final every now and again, great, and get the odd scalp, but they want to be playing good football. And I think, is it good football at the moment? I don't know. It's tough. You can't, as I say, they want to play a certain way, but they know they can't play that way, and so they've kind of caught in between a rock and a hard place with that regard. I think it'll be difficult for Liverpool, but then name me a game where it hasn't been difficult this season, apart from Man United away, obviously.
Yeah, well, we know all about them from Theo, so we won't go back to that again. But Gorsty, in terms of Southampton, I thought he called them a weird team there, and I completely agree. I mean, you think of Southampton of having this style. They have a manager that Jurgen Klopp is obviously a great admirer of, and was really sort of praising of him earlier today. But then at the same time, we were going through their players a little bit earlier on, and you think, well, there's not really anyone there that any of the top teams would be looking at. They're a really strange bunch, aren't they?
I think there's just a definition of a mid-table team, aren't they? Every league has them, and Southampton fall into that category for me. I mean, I'm just looking at the results here, just pull them up while Doyle was answering the question, and got beat by Wolves away, beat Leeds at home, they drew with Burnley at home, beat Watford away, beat Villa away in successive games, but then got beat by Norwich last week. So it's difficult to kind of put your finger on where a team like that might be, where such as a sporadic set of results. Obviously, Chelsea beat them at Stamford Bridge. But as we said, and we'll probably say for pretty much 99% of Liverpool's home games, Liverpool have got a winner, haven't they? They didn't against Brighton, despite being 2-0 up. And I think the international break's done Liverpool a world of good in terms of resetting a bit, refreshing, getting one or two players back from injury, and they've certainly looked a lot better since football came back last week than they did before it, when they drew with Brighton and then laboured against West Ham. So I'm expecting a fairly comfortable afternoon for Liverpool. I thought they were superb against Arsenal, one of the best performances at Anfield for some time, particularly second half. Wednesday night was routine and comfortable against Porto. So Saturday afternoon should be relatively straightforward.
Yeah, it's one that Liverpool should win, Theo, and I suppose you've got to factor in as well, as much as Liverpool can only sort of take care of their own results. Manchester City playing West Ham on Sunday, Chelsea playing Manchester United. If Liverpool can beat Southampton on Saturday, it's one of those weekends where the pressure would then be on their title rivals the following day.
Yeah, it would, but there's going to be many twists and turns still to go in this title race, and it's one where, like you said, Liverpool have to just focus on their own results. There's already that little bit of a gap forming, but then Southampton have they've done well against these big teams, like they got a draw with Man City, done well against United. There are going to be surprise results this season, like Burnley drew with Chelsea a couple of weeks ago. It's going to be far too early to predict things. Like United, could they have a nice bounce back against Chelsea, do everyone a favour? Liverpool just got to focus on doing what they can do best, and like what we're seeing from them this season, scoring 2-3 times every game. Well, you look at Southampton, and they're a side that's missing Danny Ings up front. Like they've only scored, I think, more than one in 2 games, and both those ended in draws to Burnley and Newcastle. The times they've won, it's just been 1-0, ignoring a comfortable 8-0 against Newport County in the League Cup, but we can write that off, can't we? Lower league in the League Cup for the games that really matter.
He's destroying non-league teams now. What's going on here?
Not non-league, lower league.
Lower league teams. So
in the context of a Premier League title race.
Whatever.
But yeah, Southampton are a team in transition, aren't they? Like a few years ago, Liverpool would have been plucking their best talent left, right, and centre. The rest of the Premier League would have been doing the same, and they were challenging for Europe. And then they've got to the point where their last stars have moved on, like Højbjerg went to Spurs, Danny Ings is gone. And it's like, well, what do they do now? Like they're going for these younger talents like Livramento, really good player, Salisu. You think, well, this could be a good time for Southampton in 2-3 years, but it's about getting that balance right. Because they've still replaced Ings with Adam Armstrong, who was prolific Championship goal scorer, but he's a bit of a slow burner to get back into the Premier League. He scored a couple and he's not quite exploded onto the scene yet. It takes time. Exact same thing happened to Che Adams when he moved up to the Premier League. Got some good players there, but there are others you're thinking, well, they're not long-term Premier League players. They're not going to take you to the next level. They're just this mid-table standard. But then these teams, when they're playing against the Liverpool and Manchester City, they can find this new level. They can pull up a shock. I can write Southampton off and say, they're not going to score many goals because they've not scored many goals this season, and they'll go and win 2-0 at Anfield with Armstrong and Adams scoring. Liverpool just need to be at their best and do what they've been doing for the majority of the season, taking their chances, Mohamed Salah scoring goals, Jota, Mane scoring goals, and make sure that this one isn't an upset, because if they win these sorts of games, especially at home, all season long, then they're going to stay in a title race.
Just before we finish then, let's pick our teams for the game. Alisson will be back in goal, Gorsty, but do you want to talk us through your back four? Probably a couple of different decisions to be made, even though Jurgen Klopp was absolutely definitive over the left-back situation earlier on.
Yeah, I think he was definitive in his point that Andy Robertson is not some busted flush, which I certainly agree with. I think people have been too quick to want Tsimikas playing and Robertson to be dropped this season. I really do. I think Robertson hasn't been great against Bournemouth in particular, against Brentford in particular, and Brighton, but I still think he's a top-class left-back. So if he's anywhere near 100%, let's have him in there. Trent will come back into the right-back slot, won't he? And then it's your centre-backs, and I think Van Dijk will come back. It's just a question of whether he gives Matip another game, second game of the week, or whether he puts in Konate. I agree with Doyle. I thought Konate was a bit shaky actually on Wednesday night, particularly for that chance for Otavio when he got a course under his feet and the counter attack was on. So I'm going to leave Matip in there. He hasn't been injured this season, I don't think so. Matip and Van Dijk, and I'm going to bring back Robertson on the left.
We all know what's going to happen now. Matip's going to go off injured at some point. But Doyle, who are you going to go for?
Well, I've given it away. Konate and Van Dijk, Robertson and Trent.
And in terms of Konate, what's the thinking behind that? Throwing him back in to get himself back on track, or do you just think that it's time for Matip to come out?
I think it's a bit of both. Matip, there's no point risking him. He's fit, although Ghosty seems to be trying to get him injured. And then with Konate, yeah, he's playing again inside 3 days. He'll have a much better game because he'll be alongside Van Dijk. It'll be good for his confidence. Let him play.
Yeah, I'm torn, to be honest. I think Matip could do a bit of damage against a bit of a chaotic Southampton midfield. But then at the same time, there is the Merseyside derby to think about next midweek, Theo. So talk us through your back four. Who are you going to go with?
Trent's at right back, Van Dijk's at centre back. I think we're all agreeing on that. I'm leaning, I think, towards Konate. He's got a bit more pace about him, and I'd feel a bit more comfortable with Matip in the derby at Goodison. But then Matip always seems to come off injured at Goodison, so maybe we're setting him up for a fall in one of these two games anyway. And then, it'll be Robertson at left back. It's been hard for him this season, but it's important to remember that part of that was coming back to pre-season late after the Euros, and then he got an injury on the eve of the season. He's almost been playing catch-up the whole time. He's not had a moment to catch his breath and find some form because they haven't really been able to train much because it has been these 2 games a week every week. Tsimikas has done brilliantly, and that's all you can ask from him, all you can expect from him. Jurgen Klopp's obviously saying, thank God we've got this option when Liverpool haven't had it in the past. But there is going to be a time when Robertson is back to his very best. And you'd like to think against Southampton at Anfield, it is a setting for him to maybe have not an easier afternoon, but fine form. It's going to be a game where he can have opportunities to get forward, and he needs to play his way into form somehow. And hopefully this is going to be the one.
Yep, absolutely. Let's move on to the midfield then, Gorsty. I'm going to go Fabinho, Henderson and Thiago, but I suppose at least one of those would come off after an hour in my scenario with Wednesday night in mind. But do you think there's an argument for Oxlade-Chamberlain to stay in? Is there anybody else that you'd put in there? I don't suppose there is. There's not really anybody else fit.
No, I don't think there is. I don't think... I think the only thing that would keep Oxlade-Chamberlain out is the fact that he's played a lot of football for someone who typically doesn't. But I also think that it's been too long that Liverpool fans haven't been able to see what many would suggest is their best midfield on paper. Thiago, Fabinho and Henderson. I think that they've only started 2 games together, possibly 3. Certainly nowhere near as many as you would have thought when Thiago signed. So, let's go with that as a 3. And then if needed, maybe Henderson or Thiago can have a little bit of a rest for Oxlade-Chamberlain. But, I'm going with you, Matt. Same midfield 3.
Yeah, Fabinho and Henderson seem almost certain to start, Doyle, given that they didn't start on Wednesday. But are you going to go with Thiago as well, or what's your thinking for this one?
Fabinho, Thiago, Oxlade-Chamberlain.
Interesting.
Because
saving Thiago for Wednesday.
Oh, Thiago's playing.
Sorry,
It's Henderson that's been then kept out. Yeah, I think Oxlade-Chamberlain obviously used to play for Southampton, so I think he'll be quite keen to play. So I think you have to sometimes bear that in mind. He'll be desperate to get a game in there. I think if it doesn't go particularly well, don't forget there's Milner. I know he's only just come back, but he booked himself a midweek off, saving himself a trip to Milan towards the end of the game. He knew exactly what he was doing there, didn't he? He's not soft. He must have been before then. He must have been just gone, I don't really like it that much, and just can't be bothered. But yeah, I think we'll probably see Milner at some point. I wouldn't, I don't want to get too far, but I wouldn't be surprised if Milner played in the derby either. But, we'll deal with that next week. But for the moment, I'm going to go with Fabinho, Thiago, Oxlade-Chamberlain.
Theo, who are you going to go with?
I'm leaning with Doyle again. The Oxlade-Chamberlain ex-club factor for me swings it for him. He's in good form. We saw what he did against Arsenal, so he can face another former club and hopefully have the same impact. I think he's done well against them in the past, hasn't he? He scored, was it the title-winning year at Anfield in the 4-0? I'd keep Thiago in. I think it's a game that would suit him. And then it's whether I go Henderson or Fabinho as the number 6. Like I said, leaning towards Doyle, is thinking save Henderson for the derby. We've only seen glimpses of him since coming back from this injury and from international duty. So you don't want to risk him too much, especially when it's going to be a frantic festive period coming up. So Fabinho can be number 6. Henderson can come on after 1 hour, and then he can start the derby and lead them to hopefully a rare Goodison victory. We've not had a few of them for a few years.
Yeah, good to have a few options in there. There's a couple of options in the front line as well, Gorsty, but I'm going to go Salah, Jota and Mane. I didn't think Minamino was particularly brilliant. He didn't do anything dreadful on Wednesday night, but probably an opportunity missed for him to stamp a bit of a mark.
Yeah, it really was, especially after coming on against Arsenal and scoring, and you could see what that meant for him and looked like the perfect opportunity to kick on, but just didn't think he did anything at all, really, on Wednesday. He kind of just chased it about and worked hard, as he always will, but no, it was a big chance missed for him. Salah, Mane and Jota, I think.
Yeah, Diogo Jota on the bench midweek, but he is back from what Klopp described as a fairly big knock against Arsenal, so would imagine he would start. Doyle, is that the same 3 for you?
I thought Minamino did okay, actually, considering he ended up playing on the right wing, didn't he, by the end? So I think he did right. I think it's his best game he's had when he's been playing down the middle, and I think that's something Liverpool are going to have to look to if they've got preparing for what might happen in January, for example. So it was something that had to be done. I think it's going to be those 3, but again, I think when it comes to the derby next week, I think Klopp will just do something crazy as he always does, but we can come to that. But yes, those 3 for this one.
Yes, we will come to that, but I am going to predict that Divock Origi plays in
Yes,
that one at some
that's
stage.
exactly what's going to happen.
That's what I was
And you
thinking.
wouldn't bet against him scoring either. Theo, for this one, no Origi in this one, saving him for the derby?
He don't think he's actually scored at Goodison before, but yeah, let Somnary shirt Divock against Everton. And it can be Mane, Salah, Jota for this one. I don't think Minamino did too bad. You'd like to see him get a goal to his name. It was an opportunity for him, but he's played in a lot of different positions when he's coming on for Liverpool. At least he's making an impact. He had a few runs down the wing where he was winning corners or getting crosses in. It'll be needed in January, and it's just about getting him and Origi minutes as they go along ahead for January. But this isn't going to be one of them. You've got Salah fit, you've got Mane fit, you've got Jota fit. Start the three of them and get the job done.
Yep. Yes, indeed. Get the job done, then make a few changes ahead of Wednesday. That will be the idea for Liverpool. I'm going to predict a 3-0 victory, so I think it might just about happen as well. Gorsty, how do you reckon it might play out?
Yeah, I think it might be a fairly comfortable afternoon. 3-1.
3-1. Doyle, are you equally as positive?
You just said then that you predict a 3-0 victory and you think it might just about happen. It's like, well, surely all of your predictions you think are happen, because why would you be predicting them then?
No. What I meant might happen was what I said before. That was that they'd go a couple of goals up and be able to make changes.
All right. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah, you just dug yourself out of that one. I think 2-0. 2-0, but it will be tougher than people are thinking.
2-0. Theo, are you also going for a 2-goal victory?
Well, I was thinking 3-0 and then you said it, and I was thinking 3-1 and Gorsty said it, and I was thinking 2-0 and Doyle said it. So, for the sake of variety, should I just bring 7-1 back? That's been done against Southampton before, hasn't it?
What about the famous Christian Walsh 8-0 against Sunderland shout from many years ago? Which, a famous prediction there. That, funny enough, that wasn't correct.
I will stick with a 3-0.
Oh, I thought you were going to go for a 7-1 there. Never mind. Well, on that note, we will finish the podcast. Thank you very much to Paul, to Ian, and to Theo for joining me. We'll have all of the coverage across the Echo, Liverpool.com, and Blood Red over the next couple of days. We'll be back on Monday, as we said, as well, to preview the Merseyside derby. And until then, it's goodbye for now.